All right, hello everybody. Welcome to our notes on conservation biology. Let me just start by saying you'll definitely want to speed this video up a little bit because this happens to be my very, very favorite topic in biology. And so I might yammer on a little too much. So I will try to make it quick without going on to too much detail. Let me just start by saying that hopefully after you've been through all of AP biology, you have developed a deep respect for the complexity of life, how incredibly amazing life is on this planet. And I hope you think about the fact that as far as we know, there are no other planets in the universe, as far as we know, that have life. There are incredible things about this planet that allow life to exist here. And it's just not very likely that those are everywhere in this universe. Could there be other life in this universe? There could be, but we're never going to contact it. To be perfectly honest, we're never going to come in contact with other life if there is other life in the universe. So this is it, you guys. We got to take care of it. So hopefully, even if you didn't like AP biology, you have this new respect for how important life is. And the other thing I was going to say is if you haven't registered for AP Environmental Science, you really should. Again, even if you don't want to be a biology major in college, it is a class that is important for you as a human being participating in life right now. We're screwing up this planet so much. We need people well educated about what's happening to our planet and how to take action to protect our planet. So that's my little plug for the AP Environmental class. All right, so this is called conservation. Whoops. This is called conservation biology. So it says ecology is the study of organisms and interactions with each other in the environment. Ecological processes occur at multiple levels of organization on Earth, and each level of organization emerges from the processes of each level below it. Conservation biology applies to all of the levels of organization that we've been talking about throughout this unit. All right. So questions, why should we conserve and how do we conserve? And there are so many great videos I would love to show you right now if we only had time. All right, so why conserve? There are two kind of appeals. We can appeal to your morality and your emotions. We can appeal to your science. And I think both of them are legitimate appeals. There are no, now I didn't make this Prezi, just to be clear, but I'm just gonna share what this author wrote. They aren't making any more Earths. Earth is, even if there's other life in this universe, you guys, Earth is unbelievably rare. It is exactly the right distance from the sun to have water that exists both in the ice form and in the liquid form. That's crazy, and in a vapor form. That's exactly the right distance from the sun. We are in a safe place in our galaxy where there's very little radiation so that we don't die from radiation. That's 99% of our galaxy. If we lived somewhere else, life couldn't exist there because of all the radiation. We have a magnetic north and south pole. So we have a molten core that produces our magnetic field, and that protects us from the solar wind. So I don't have a good word, radioactive debris. I'm not saying that right, so astronomers forgive me, that comes from the sun, and that blows away because of our magnetic field. And if we didn't have that molten core, our atmosphere would just be sucked away by the sun, blown away by the sun. So just all these amazing, unbelievably amazing things come together to allow life on this planet. The moon in this photo is another example. The moon is what causes our tides, which allows some of our the circulation of warm water and nutrient-rich water around our planet, which carries nutrients to other ecosystems. I mean, this planet is unfreaking amazing, unfreaking believable. I didn't say that well. Anyway, so we should take care of it. So they aren't making any more Earths. Life is amazing. You've studied cells, you've studied genetics, you've studied all kinds of stuff. I hope that you have come to an amazing appreciation of how incredibly complex life is. Tell me something you can find that's more amazing. Number 3, the fact that human activity is contributing to extinction is morally ambiguous at best. It's crushing that we are the number one cause. There have been 5 mass extinctions in Earth's history caused primarily by natural disasters. Humans are causing the 6th mass extinction, and it's happening right now. And when you look out my window, you're like, I don't see any mass extinction happening, KJ. That's because the ecosystem outside my window has been relatively stable for, 20, 30 years. But the ecosystems across our planet, they're vanishing. Our forests are getting cut down. Our rivers are getting polluted and overfished. Our oceans are being overfished. So much is happening that more species are disappearing faster than they did when the dinosaurs disappeared because of a meteor and possibly volcanic activity. They're disappearing faster now than they did when the dinosaurs disappeared, you guys, and it's our fault. Okay. Question right here. What do these 3 species have in common? There are less than 100 individuals in the wild. This prezi is actually a few years old, so I don't know the actual number of these animals that are in the wild, but that's what they have some in common. So very sad. Breaks my heart. Okay, so if you're not interested in the emotional appeal, which I totally am, let's take a look at the scientific appeal for why we need to care about diversity on our planet and conserving our planet. So biodiversity has incredibly important benefits that make our existence not only possible, but comfortable. So the first type of diversity, there's lots of others that aren't mentioned here, but the first one they mention is genetic diversity. We want species that are super genetically diverse. Remember that the cheetahs, they seem to have gone through some bottleneck effects and their diversity is really low. They're born with lots of birth defects. They're sort of slated for extinction. So we need populations that are super diverse. Then you take a look at species diversity within an ecosystem. We don't want just 1 species or 2 species. We want lots and lots of species. Right now, our farms are usually extremely not diverse. Usually human farms are what we call monoculture, one species growing there. And that means that we have to fight pests and we have to fight diseases and we have to spray pesticides and we have to add fertilizers. You don't have to do any of that in a diverse ecosystem. It takes care of itself and it's free. Okay, and then we also want ecosystem diversity. So we want lots and lots and lots of different types of ecosystems. We don't want just forests or just marine ecosystems. We want all of the ecosystems. Ecosystems, let's see, my picture was covering it up. Give me just a second. Ecosystems provide essential services that make human existence possible, such as nutrient cycling. That's another one that makes planet Earth so incredible, you guys. The idea that everything on this planet recycles. This planet invented recycling. Humans didn't invent recycling. This planet is such an amazing recycler. Even within your bodies, you know that you're recycling nutrients all the time. So nutrient cycling, purification of wastes, lots of organisms clean up the toxins and clean up waste and renew it into something new. That's amazing. And that's part of what ecosystem diversity does for us. All right, moving on. Oops. Still number 3, I don't think I got that. No, it's coming up. It's coming up. I'm sorry. I'm going the wrong direction. All right, keep going. Sorry. All right. The current mode of human existence is not sustainable into the indefinite future. So this is something that you're going to learn about in AP Environmental Science a little bit more, but just sort of the human population growth graph. You're seeing here that infant mortality has decreased significantly. However, in the United States, infant mortality is way higher than the vast majority of developed nations. So that's inexcusable in the United States. And there's all kinds of reasons that that's happening. AP Environmental will talk about that. But we're also seeing life expectancy increasing, and we're seeing the population increase. The population is not increasing as fast as it used to be. So that's a good sign. We are going to meet our carrying capacity. There's a point where the earth can't carry any more human beings. And when we go beyond the carrying capacity, that means we start running out of food and we have mass starvation. Right now this might be counterintuitive, we actually produce enough food for every single person on this planet to have a 2,200 calorie diet. There's more than enough food on this planet to feed every single person. We still have starvation because that food is often not distributed evenly across the planet. So Americans waste tons and tons of food. I think Americans, I wish I remember the most recent statistic. I think the one I saw was either 20 or 25%. Americans make up like 5% of the Earth's population, and yet we use like 20 to 25, don't quote me on that, but it's somewhere in there, 20 to 25% of the Earth's resources. And so there's all these other people on the planet that are missing things because we are not evenly distributing them. So as Earth's population gets higher, it becomes less and less likely that we can keep large populations and will be more likely to hit that carrying capacity. And then number 3, not only does human activity impact other organisms, it impacts humans themselves. So Rachel Carson in this picture here, she was one of the very first, she wrote a super important book called Silent Spring, and that's a book that you could still find at Barnes & Noble, along with Darwin's, oh my gosh, I suddenly forgot, Theory of Evolution, what's it called? Origin of Species. Where's my brain? Trying to talk too fast. Anyway, she connected the use of a pesticide called DDT to the decline of the bald eagles. And if you have not studied that, again, apes, you would study that, AP Environmental. But it is just such a depressing story. We used this amazing mosquito spray called DDT. It was super effective. And we sprayed it all over the frickin' planet, like everywhere. Anywhere there were mosquitoes, we sprayed DDT. Well, DDT would rain, it would wash into our waterways and collect in the water. And then the eagles would eat fish or other animals that ate fish. And the DDT started to collect within the eagles and other birds of prey. It would collect inside of their bodies. So even though there was only a tiny amount of DDT respectively around the planet, it was super concentrated in our top predators, especially the predators that ate food from waterways. And so the only impact that we saw was that the eagles, when they would mate, they would do all the right things, they would build a nest, sit on their eggs, but the eggshells were soft. And they weren't supposed to be. And so when the eagles sat on their nests, their eggs would tear open and their babies would die. And their reproductive rate dropped dramatically. And they almost went extinct. And Rachel was the one that connected the two and really publicized what was going on. And so then we started having all over the world, people started banning the use of DDT. And now we've seen the eagle population recover, something amazing. If I asked you guys in person how many of you have seen a bald eagle like in the wild, probably most of you. And that's amazing. In my lifetime, bald eagles were endangered species. Nobody saw them in the wild. And now they've come back. And it's just such an exciting thing that we could actually change what we had done wrong. Now, here's where it gets really complicated. DDT is great at killing mosquitoes, and there are many, many mosquito-borne diseases around the world. Yellow fever, Zika, and malaria are the ones that come to mind. They kill hundreds of millions of human beings every year. When we used DDT, we saw the death rate from those diseases come down. So now, which is more important? Humans or eagles and other birds of prey? I don't want to make those decisions. It's a really complicated subject. It's not just cut and dry, oh, we shouldn't use DDT. There are consequences for using it, and there are consequences for not using it. And add to that, I'll just mention this, that mosquitoes have started to become immune to DDT. So that makes it all complicated and everything. So Rachel Carson was one of the first to connect what humans are doing and the impact that's having on our planet. And then this image here, and there's lots of other images. I wonder if I pulled another one up, just about what happens, for example, with global warming. As the planet gets warmer, where plants and animals can survive is changing. And so this diagram here is showing you the range of this particular butterfly and where they'll be able to survive. Well, butterflies are fairly harmless critters, but there's more interesting topics like, let's see if I can pull one up here really quickly, the mosquitoes that carry malaria. I think I have it over here, you guys, so give me just a second. The mosquitoes that carry malaria, where did I put that? Give me just a moment. Here we go. So projected range, let's see, maybe this one right here. There we go. So this is what's happening with climate change. Yellow, the yellow areas on this map, that's where the Anopheles mosquito and the Plasmodium falciparum parasite live. So the mosquito carries that parasite, and when it injects into a human being, it transfers that parasite into a human being. So the yellow shows where the Anopheles mosquito survives. The Anopheles mosquito is fairly fragile. It only can survive in warm climates. Well, as our planet is getting warmer, the Anopheles mosquito range is increasing. So these are predicted ranges of where the Anopheles mosquito will be available as the planet warms. And so if you notice, we don't have malaria in the United States. Remember, I said it kills hundreds of millions of people every year, not once in a while, every year. We don't have it in the United States. Whew. Until this planet gets warmer and the Anopheles mosquito starts moving into Florida and into Texas and into the West Coast. So the range of the Anopheles mosquito is increasing, and that's an impact of global warming. I was going to show you a couple others. Oh, kudzu. Oh my gosh, this is the creepiest thing ever. So kudzu is a plant. I know it's mentioned in your textbook. Kudzu is a plant. It's an invasive species. It doesn't belong in the United States. It was brought here, long story, I'm not going to go into the details, but it has exploded because of lack of predators. So that's usually what happens with invasive species. They get brought from an ecosystem where they evolved with predators, herbivores, other animals, whatever, who ate them. And so their population was controlled. But in an invasive species, humans have carried them to a new ecosystem where their predators are missing. And then they overproduce and they take over a landscape. So in this case, kudzu is affecting a huge area. Let's see if I have I thought I had the kudzu range. Yeah, you can see the kudzu range right here. So on this map here, you can see where kudzu is. Notice that it's not located in Minnesota. Again, that's a climate issue. Minnesota's too cold for kudzu. What happens with global warming, ladies and gentlemen? Kudzu starts increasing and increasing. Its range is going to keep spreading as the planet gets warmer. Right now, our southern states spend billions upon billions of dollars trying to control kudzu. So if you look at this image, oops, where was it? This is the image I wanted. If you look at this image, it's basically a monoculture, like a farm. The kudzu has grown over everything. All the plants and trees that are underneath the kudzu, they're all dead now. The kudzu completely prevents them from photosynthesizing. So there's really only one species living here. And so our governments are spending so much money constantly cutting down kudzu, and it keeps growing back. It grows back super, super fast. We don't want that in Minnesota. We don't want global warming. We don't want the Anopheles mosquito here. We don't want kudzu here. All right, I'm trying to think if there was anything else I wanted to say to you. Okay, I'm going to go, where's my stuff? There we go, that's what I was looking for. Come back. Okay, so moving on, I told you I get into this topic. It's exciting, it's depressing, it's so incredibly important. Okay, so the difference between the two terms, conservation and environmentalism. Conservation is the scientific study of the human ecosystem interactions with the aim of minimizing human impact. Environmentalism is activism. It's the idea of standing up to protect the environment. So Greenpeace, for example, those are environmentalists, the people who do work with Greenpeace. All right, oops, I didn't want to do that. Let's move on. Okay, so how can we conserve? I want to let you know that it is not a lost cause. There are so many amazing, exciting things that are happening right now with people, governments working to conserve what's happening on the planet. But we really need to, get going. We really need to start making a huge difference now. So how some of these issues arise. Humans do all sorts of things to populations of other species for all sorts of reasons. So the image to the left are tuna that are being collected by Japan, and we see the population diminishing. Tusks from elephants, just killing the elephant just for the tusk. Oh my gosh, it's so depressing. Now I just have to say this. I'm not sure the author who made this, I'm not sure why he has a child that's eating a hamburger, but I will mention that even eating meat, beef in particular, cattle are so bad for the environment. They fart methane, which is a terrible global warming gas. They use tons and tons of water. Farmers have to give them tons and tons of water. There's so many ways that eating cattle is so bad for the environment. So there's just a lot of ways that humans are impacting the environment and populations. So at the species level, small populations are more prone to collapse than larger populations. And we learned this when we were talking about genetic drift earlier. So if you have a small population, it's more likely that there's going to be inbreeding, and it's more likely that certain genes are going to disappear. When you start to look at this diagram, you start to lose genetic variability. That can cause lower reproductive rates. They are less successful at reproducing when their genetic diversity is less, and there's going to be higher mortality. Among cheetahs, for example, they have all kinds of birth defects that increase their mortality rate. What does that lead to? An even smaller population. So the process is called the extinction vortex. And the smaller and smaller a population gets, there's a point where scientists are like, yeah, they can't come back anymore because there's no genetic diversity. There's nowhere to get new DNA to reinvigorate the population. So here's an example actually of reinvigorating a population that still had some genetic diversity in other locations. So in this case, these are the greater prairie chickens in Illinois. It says, note the increasing decline. What a stupid way of wording it. Increasing decline. Just steeper decline in number of males and hatch rate of eggs. So the graph on the left is the number of males, decreasing. Number on the right is the hatching success. So the number of eggs that are hatching, it's just plummeting for them. By 1990, hardly tiny percent are hatching. But then conservationists came in and they brought new chickens from other populations, so other locations that have new DNA. They brought them into this Illinois population and they reinvigorated the DNA, the genetic diversity within that population. And look, 3 years later, get my picture out of the way, 3 years later, we see this huge impact on their hatching success. And that has to do with just maintaining that genetic diversity within the population. At the ecosystem level, human activities can disrupt the complex interaction networks, I'll comment on that in a second, that connect members of the community to each other and to the abiotic environment. These disruptions can stress the ecosystem, which may collapse if it is stressed too much. Also, the total impact of any particular disruption to an ecosystem cannot be calculated. It's a violation of the laws of physics. I wouldn't say it quite that way, but let me make my point, or make the author's point here. Give me just a second. I want to show you a food web. I gotta find it. It's always tricky to find my tabs and everything, everybody. So I'm going to show you just an image of a food web. Get this out of the way. Where'd my food web go? Deer moose range. Oh, that is so good. I love that one. There's my food web that I was looking for. Okay, so here we've got a really ridiculously simple food web, and it's about as complex as you're ever going to see diagrams of. Real food webs, you guys, might have hundreds of different species that are involved, and we've got 10 here or something. But I just want you to start doing the math on this super simple food web. So we've got rabbits in the middle. Let's just say in our example that humans come into this ecosystem and they start hunting rabbits and they start over hunting rabbits. Let's try to calculate the impact it's going to have on this ecosystem. Well, the arrows, this is important. Make sure you know what the arrows mean. Pretend that the arrows are pointing into the next animal's mouth. That way you know who's eating whom. So the rabbit has an arrow pointing to the rattlesnake, and it has an arrow pointing to the hawk. And it has an arrow pointing to bacteria when it dies. The bacteria are decomposing them. Okay, so that means that they are food for rattlesnakes and food for hawks. So if the rabbit population is severely disrupted, that's going to totally impact the rattlesnakes and the hawks. Well, now the rattlesnakes eat two other things. The rattlesnakes eat tarantulas and they eat kangaroo rats. So if they can't eat rabbits anymore, and tarantulas are pretty small in comparison to rabbits, we're going to need to eat lots and lots and lots more of the tarantulas and lots more of the kangaroo rats, which means their populations are going to start plummeting. And then over here, the hawk, we're not going to have, if the hawks aren't able to eat the rabbits, then they're going to have to start eating more of the lizards and more of the kangaroo rats. Oh, and look at the kangaroo rats are getting eaten by the rattlesnakes. Oh my gosh, just losing the rabbits, it's going to have an impact on every single organism in this ecosystem. We can't calculate. If we lose polar bears, you guys, everybody talks about losing polar bears in the Arctic. What's going to be the impact? Who freaking knows? It's too complicated for us to know. We need to not lose polar bears. We need to not lose these organisms because they are all interconnected. All right, so that's one example. I got to remember what the other one was I wanted to show you. Oh yeah, I wanted to show you Snapshot Serengeti. Super cool. We'll get to that in just a second. Oops, give me a moment. There we go. That's what we're looking for. Okay, so moving on, data from the Hubbard Brook Experimental Forest in New Hampshire. So this is super interesting. They are looking at a forest where a huge swath of the forest was clear cut. Clear cutting is when you completely cut down the trees and don't try to plant on top of them. So when they clear cutted this swath, what you're looking at, the graph here, it says the nitrate concentration in runoff. So what that means is when it rains, the water washes through the forest and it washes through this clear-cut area. But when you analyze the water that's rushing through, it's full of nutrients. It's full of nitrates washing off this mountainside. So the nitrates are things that the plants could use, new plants could use to grow. But because they're getting washed away, now this land is void of good nutrients. And so even if you try to replant it, plants aren't going to grow very well there initially because it's void of nutrients. The nutrients washed away with the rain. There were no plants to hold on to the nutrients. The forest and plants keep the nutrients in the soil and keep them from washing away. And so clear cutting a forest can be devastating to a particular ecosystem. There's also the effect that's called edge effects. So in these, we still have some forest ecosystem, but then we have all these little ecosystems that humans accidentally created by cutting down the forest. And that can be a huge problem because now this is supposed to be the picture on the left. It's supposed to be, oh, this is natural one, sorry. Edges created by human activity. This is supposed to be all forest land, but inside we suddenly have this new ecosystem. And when we have a new ecosystem, new organisms are going to live in that new ecosystem. I'll give you a quick example without going into many details, but Minnesota deer carry with them certain parasites that profoundly affect our moose population. Well, because of edge effects along highways, deer have been moving in their habitat throughout Minnesota. They didn't used to be near moose, and now they live in similar areas to the moose. And so there's profound concern that the deer traveling through edge effects, traveling through human-created ecosystems, are now interacting with moose and causing moose to decline. I'm not going to go into any more details on that, but Human fragmentation of habitats leads to increases in edges. Also, something like a highway running through, just a highway running through a forest. If you have deer on the left side of the highway and deer on the right side of the highway, often we have a fence, so you will find that they cannot mate with each other anymore. So they have a tendency to inbreed. The deer on the left side of the fence are going to breed with the deer on the left side and right on right, instead of interacting with each other. So that causes them to have a decrease in their genetic diversity. Oh my gosh, the craziness. It's depressing. So what are things that we can do, or what are things that can happen? So the first thing that we have to do is monitor our populations. Lots of you know that we monitor like using radio collars. Monitoring allows us to figure out how many organisms there are, what's threatening these organisms, and how do they live. So what do we need to do to protect them? We need to know about them. So monitoring is part of that. The light in my, there we go, in my room just shut off. Okay, so what I think is super interesting, I just wanted to show you guys this here really quickly, is another kind of monitoring that I'm guessing most of you have never seen before, and I think it's so cool. I want to participate in this. I haven't had a chance to do this yet. This is called Snapshot Serengeti, and this is a scientific program, and they have a bunch of them. Serengeti is a national park and reserve that's in Tanzania, but the scientists have set up these snapshot oh my gosh, citizen scientist things all over the world. So this is just one example. Basically, they have motion detector cameras that they have set up all over the Serengeti. And every time an animal walks by, the camera goes click. Well, there are bajillions of animals that are triggering these cameras, and the scientists don't have time to count every single animal and figure out what every single animal is doing. So they have learned to post it on the internet, and that dorks like me go, oh, that's so cool, I want to try. And so you look at the picture and you're like, I see a zebra, and you identify that it's a zebra. It'll ask you questions about what is the animal doing, how many animals do you see there, and you have to identify the animal. And in this case, it gives you tips. These are all animals that it could be, and it gives you a chance to look at the animal. It teaches you how to identify the animal. Now, you might be worried that KJ isn't that smart, and she might think that that's actually an elephant instead of a zebra. So instead of just showing it to me and trusting that I correctly identified the animal, they're going to show it to about 5 to 10 other citizen scientists. And then they're going to see, okay, what do all the citizen scientists think that animal is? And if only one person says it's an elephant and 9 people say that it's a zebra, they're pretty sure it's a zebra. And then the scientists can just look at the ones where everybody misidentified. So like 2 people said zebra and 2 people said Thompson's gazelles and 2 people said redbucks and 2 people said porcupines. Then the scientists are going to go back and look at that photo and correctly identify it for the citizen scientists. But then they can monitor, they can see what are these animals doing, where are these animals living, who are the predators, are they in that area? So it's another way of monitoring these important populations. All right, oops, come back. There we go. We also used to do, or we didn't get to do during the COVID year, a field trip to an area where they are studying red-headed woodpeckers. This one is a red cockaded woodpecker, but they're studying them close by to us. So it's like a 20-minute drive, and they're studying these red-headed woodpeckers because they're super endangered. All right, moving on. So then we need to plan, and we need to plan like where to put reserves, where to put national parks, that kind of thing. What they're identifying in this map are called the biodiversity hotspots. A hotspot is an area that has extreme levels of biodiversity, and so they are the most important ecosystems on our planet for us to protect. So there's marine hotspots, and there are terrestrial or land hotspots. So those are just giving you some ideas. Whoops. And then I love this one here because I have been to this exact location. This is an example of a particular corridor. These are called habitat corridors, and they come in all shapes and sizes. So you can have tunnels that run under a highway. You can have bridges that run over a highway. These bridges that they have in Banff, Canada, are bridges just for animals, and they have motion detector cameras on them. So they snap a photo every time an animal crosses over. Tiny animals, huge animals, but cars aren't allowed on them. And it allows, remember we said that fragmentation of a highway prevents the deer on the left and the right from getting to mate with each other. Well, now the deer just cross over the highway. And the motion detector cameras confirm that animals get it. Like, they understand. They want to get to the other side, and they're going to look for a way to get to the other side. And they use these habitat corridors. So hoping that we'll see more and more of these kinds of corridors in the United States. I know they have some. I've never seen one in Minnesota, but hoping that they'll do that soon. Here's an example of how sad. The United States currently has 62 national parks, although they add like one a year practically. Currently, we have 62 national parks. And so that's awesome that we have these national parks. But the national parks are way too small, and they don't allow animals to go from one national park to another. There's no corridors for the animals to go from one to the next. So for example, we have Yellowstone National Park and we have Grand Teton, but there are highways, farmlands, ranches in between the two. And so it doesn't allow safe passage for the grizzly bears to go from one to the next. What you're looking at here, it has to do with how many animals can live in that area. So the MVP stands for the minimum viable population. I had to think that one through. Minimum viable population. So in the red line, that territory could handle up to 50 grizzly bears. Notice that's not all protected area. There's a lot of area that human beings are located in. And so that's only 50 bears. To handle a population of 500 bears, the entire dotted line would need to be available for the grizzly bears. And so we just need to understand how much space, and we need to form ways for animals to get from, say, one protected area to another protected area without running into cars and humans and all that kind of thing. All right. And then once we've studied and we start getting some ideas, we actually need to put some plans into action. So obviously national parks are a huge part of what we're doing. And they show some of the national parks here, but this is already out of date. Like I said, there are now 62 national parks. As of today, I've been to 47 of the 62 national parks. Love going there. So that's one form of conservation and action that we can do. And then in other countries, there's other ways that they're having protected zones where there's no agriculture, there's no ranching, that kind of thing, just to make sure that the animals have safe spots in the world. And then finally, I think this is the last thing we're going to talk about, is called restoration ecology. This deals with using ecological ways to restore damaged ecosystems. So there's so many examples, it would blow the mind. In this example, you've got radioactive waste that is in water systems, and it's contaminating the local waterways. So they figured out how to mess with the chemistry and add, I believe it was bacteria, microbial activity. It doesn't say for sure what it is, but they added microorganisms that were able to eat up and break up the toxins. And so they reduced the amount of radioactivity in these ponds. They did it biologically. There's fascinating bacteria that eat oil. So when we have an oil spill, like in the Gulf of Mexico, we can add these bacteria, and they're going to eat and eat and eat and eat, and they eat the oil and they turn it into harmless organic molecules. They clean up the oil spill for us. And then when they run out of oil, they die. Oh my gosh, that's brilliant, right? Clean it up for us for free. And then we don't have to worry about their population exploding, because when the oil is gone, then they can't survive anymore. This is a cool photo of humans really taking an active role in restoring an ecosystem. We're doing that all over Minnesota. Pretty much every large park that you go to now, there are prairie restorations. You should pay attention, see the bird houses that are there and the grasses that are growing. And so we can restore some of the ecosystems that have damaged. And the author here says, a field with no end of work to do. If that is at all interesting to you guys, you are guaranteed a job. You are guaranteed that there are things for you to do out there. So that is it, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry if I talked too long, but this is such an exciting area of biology for me. I hope you all have a fabulous day. Bye.